My guest on this segment is probably my ultimate hero. He's known throughout the industry as a gentleman. His passions are fly fishing, the great outdoors, and his beautiful wife, Diane. And it's a pleasure to have you on this segment.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Finally to have achieved the status of legend. Unbelievable.
In your own time.
Yeah, in my own mind.
Let's start off with, I know you're from Florida, so am I. How did you first get introduced to fly fishing?
In 1958, I met a kid by the name of Chico Fernandez when he first came from Cuba to the United States.
I met him once, yeah.
And Chico and I had two other friends, a kid named Norman Duncan and another kid named John Emery. And we were all very passionate about light tackle fishing. Mostly it was plug casting in those days and some spinning. And some of our heroes at that time were just beginning to fly fish in saltwater, just beginning.
I see.
And we became aware of it, and it called to us. And in those times, there were no forums to learn how to do it.
No.
So we started teaching ourselves and bothering and pestering those few people that were involved in it. And it sort of went from there. And interestingly, through the years, with regard to Chico anyway, our lives have had a number of different parallels. We ultimately wound up going to the University of Miami together, and after that we both went into the world of finance. Chico went into accounting and I went into banking. Ultimately we both married Delta flight attendants. And beyond that, both of us finally made fishing
the career,
our lives. And through all these years we've remained friends, and so it's been an interesting roll of the years with Chico and with my other friends too, but it's just an interesting
That's really where it started.
Yeah.
And you guys, he told me stories about you fishing the trail, that you'd run over to the trail, and yeah.
We lived on the Tamiami Trail back in those days when the snook cruised with their backs out along the trail, and there was no guardrail along the trail, and I got my driving license when I was 14. They had a law in Florida that if you operated farm equipment, you could get your driving license at 14, which I did. And my dad lent me $200, and I bought a pickup truck from the estate of a friend of ours' dad when he passed away, and they had this old truck, and I bought it, and suddenly I and Chico and our other two friends, we were mobile.
Right, you could move now.
And we used to put our fly rods in the back of that truck, and one guy would drive, and a couple of guys would stand in the back of the truck and strip the fly line out into the bed of the pickup, and we'd slowly drive down the trail until we saw those snook cruising along the trail. We'd drive past them about 50 yards, pull off, and cast to the fish right out of the bed of the pickup.
Incredible.
You know, the Greyhound buses whizzing by on the backside, and
it wasn't that busy though then, was
no,
it?
it really wasn't.
No,
it really wasn't. No comparison.
Chico said he hooked a Volkswagen once.
He did.
Yeah.
He broke an Orvis Shooting Star impregnated bamboo rod on that Volkswagen.
Incredible.
I remember that like yesterday.
Yeah.
Real screaming and.
He said motorcycles used to come by. They were a problem because he said they'd be like mosquitoes.
Yeah.
But how did the Stu App days happen? How did that, how did all that happen? Because you got to travel and...
Stu was one of my early idols. And we used to watch every move that Stu made and drive poor Stu crazy. And then, actually, it was funny. I met Stu not through fishing, but it turned out through duck hunting. We used to duck hunt in the Everglades west of Miami, and somehow we wound up duck hunting together. And that's how our friendship began. And from there...
So it started from hunting, really.
Started from duck hunting, yeah.
Did he remember you were the kid that would pull up and watch him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
He
yeah.
would never forget that. We drove him crazy. We were like horrible shadows and specters that used to follow him around.
So from the hunting that he said, come along with me? Or
I think I probably started pestering him again and bullied him into taking me fishing. And then there ensued a period of 7 years where I never got into a skiff with anybody but Stu.
Wow.
We fished together constantly for 7 years. And he was, in those times, a 747 captain. So he had plenty of time off. I worked in a bank, and I had a great staff that would let me escape anytime I wanted. And so he and I traveled through his connections with Pan American World Airways. He and I went everywhere fishing. And
because that's when you kind of got introduced to the really offshore sailfish thing and all that. Was that when all that happened?
Correct, yeah.
I know you went on some of the, and some of the stories we can't really talk about here, but I know you've gone on some of those early American sportsman things that were you like the backup guide or what?
No, actually, on some of them, I poled the camera boat.
Oh, I see.
On some of them, I actually poled, we did some offshore where I operated the offshore boats.
Right.
And then in the latter years of that program, I actually was on camera in some of the shows. And then that series was succeeded by a series called Outdoor Life,
right,
which was hosted by
the guy who did Cannon, right?
The guy who did Cannon.
Yeah.
I can't remember
He
his
passed
name.
away.
He passed away, but anyway, he had this marvelous, rich voice, and I just can't remember his name.
Yeah, I went blank too.
Yeah, and so I actually did a number of those shows with all the same producers and everything who had done The American Sportsman, did Outdoor Life, and I did a show with Dick Butkus and a show with John Havlicek and a show with Lefty and there's hockey players, and I did probably a dozen different shows with the Outdoor Life series over the years that they stayed in business. And then some years later, I actually did my own saltwater series for a couple of years called The Saltwater Angler.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was a show that I did between the Outdoor Life series and the beginning of the Walker's Cay Chronicles. And so there have been a string of outdoor kind of shows, and the most recent ones were the ones that you alluded to earlier with Glenn Lau, who's been a lifelong friend and
what a cameraman. Incredible, the best. He is.
Boy, Glenn is
famous for the Big Mouth series he did, and he has quite a few things that he's...
The most incredible imagination and reserve of ingenuity that I've ever seen in any human being that I've ever known. The guy is just unbelievable. I'll look at something and see a blank wall, and he'll walk right through it.
Incredible.
It's just amazing.
How did you meet Glenn? How did that all happen?
It was a pretty sad thing, actually. We had back in the early 70s, we had a mutual friend, two mutual friends, who died in an airplane accident, flying over Florida Bay, spotting tarpon.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, it was two of our very dear friends, and they crashed in this light plane, and I had gone down in a helicopter the next morning at daylight. They crashed late in the evening or late in the afternoon, and so there was no search at night.
No.
We went early the next morning and found them in a helicopter, and I dropped out of the helicopter and swam in there and found them. Because we thought they had swam out and gone to an island.
Right. But no, they didn't.
So we met at the funeral for these people.
Interesting.
Glenn and I, and there was an immediate synergy there, and
was he moved down in Florida then?
No, he came for the funeral.
Oh, he came for the funeral?
He lived in Ocala.
Okay. Okay. Because I know that's where he started really kind of gave up what he was doing and started filming the underwater stuff and everything at that time.
Yeah.
So how did you get hooked up with him to do that new series? I mean...
We've always, Glenn and I have talked about doing something together for 20 years. And
Quest for Adventure, right?
Quest for Adventure. And it finally came together last year. So
you have the time to do that?
No.
No, I didn't think so.
No, of course not.
How's Walker's Cay going? How's that?
Going real well.
Good?
We're getting ready to go into our 10th
Incredible.
Our 10th season.
Did you ever think it was going to be 10 years?
No, I never did.
I bet you did.
I never did. And it's been 10 wonderful years. And I hope it'll go well into the future. I guess as long as it's well received, there's a chance that it may.
It kind of gives you hope for that kind of quality of filming and camaraderie and nature, and it's kind of nice because if people accept that, it shows that it can be done.
I hope so.
And that's not shot on videotape.
That's shot on film.
What an arduous process. Yes.
We're about the last, and Glenn shoots film.
Okay.
But we and Glenn are about the last people shooting film in the outdoors. And the truth is that video is getting so good.
Yes.
That a lot of the things that you couldn't achieve with video in the past
are
now achievable. So
yeah, we use digital, so there's a lot of help there. You can even process it a little that sort of look like film, but not. I don't know. Film is
won't be long. I have a feeling that at the rate the technology is
moving.
Yeah, I think it'll come.
Let's talk equipment. One of your main passions, and I know, is canoeing. You know, flip a canoe and he's gone. Give us your setup. I asked Chico the same thing, and give us your setup, just briefly run through what your favorite type of canoe for fishing the backwater would be.
I like basically, first of all, a tumble home canoe.
Yes.
There are many different hull shapes.
Right.
But for me, the tumble home canoe is best for what we do because there's a lot of standing up involved, both for the angler and the poler. And the tumble home hull shape gives you the most initial stability, not the most latent stability, because once you go past that point, a tumble home canoe
goes over.
But that first stability comes best and most from a tumble home shape. I like a keel. A small keel on a canoe because
the length of the canoe?
The length of the canoe. Okay. Because the keel channels the energy of the stroke or the pole stroke or the paddle. If you have no keel, it would be like poling a potato chip. It could go... slide all over. So the pole conserves your energy, focuses and directs your energy, and sometimes we cover huge distances in a canoe during the course of any fishing day. I like an 18-foot canoe. 18 foot? Yeah. Because it provides more stability. You get a lot of stability in a canoe from length. Because you don't have a lot of width. People don't think that way, though. Tremendous stability from length.
They think width.
I know. But width, although it's good in some ways, it's bad in other ways. It slows down So resistance. As for width, I look to a canoe to be, for saltwater fishing, somewhere between 37 and 39 inches wide at the chine and 18 feet long, and that gives you a tremendously stable boat. And you hope that it weighs somewhere between 40 and 65 pounds, depending on what it's made out of and so forth.
What materials do you think? What do you like? I know it's a big controversy all with this composite and metal and foam and all this stuff. What do you think?
Well, it's the day of carbon fiber and Kevlar and foam.
Yeah.
So those are pretty much state-of-the-art materials today, and they're quiet and very light and extremely stiff.
Yes.
So that's what that's all about. I love cane seats in a canoe, and I love wooden gunnels and thwarts made out of wood.
You're a classic kind of guy. Yep. I like it. Yep.
And I like a dark green sort of a hunter green
hunter
color
green
in a
color.
canoe, because I do a lot of duck hunting in
Right.
canoes and so forth, so I like to be able to blind it up. And like you said, put me in a boat like that and put a little water out there somewhere, and
You're gone.
I'll be out of here.
How about the pole? Now, I talked to Rick Murphy, and Rick told me that his dad designed like a two-piece pole. Is that the kind that you were using
I
too?
don't use a two-piece pole basically because I use long canoes.
Okay, so
The
you
fellows
need
that use
length.
the fellows that use short boats have 2-foot poles. I do get my poles from Rick's dad. He makes great poles, but I use a 13-foot long pole
13 foot.
with the fork of a guava tree in one end.
Guava tree.
Yeah, and a little plug of American walnut, in the other end for the point end, and I use that guava fork for the fork end. And
Aesthetically, it's nice looking, but it lasts, right?
forever. It's very salt tolerant, and
How did you discover that?
as kids, when hollow poles first came up, which were aluminum poles,
Right.
we started using those guava forks because guava was common in South Florida, where I grew up around
Right.
Homestead, and guava makes perfect forks. We used to make our slingshots.
That's amazing.
out
I grew up with guavas all over, never even thought about it.
It's the best. Perfect forks. Started out making slingshots out of them, and immediately when we saw a hollow pole, we immediately thought of those perfect forks. And so it was just a natural evolution for guava.
That's incredible. What a great tip. How about these new boats now you're affiliated with? Now you have a new boat, and I looked at the boat, and I don't mean derogatory, but it's a classic boat. It looks kind of like you. It's a classic boat. It has the features of it and I don't mean this in a bad way, it's almost like the 50s, but it's not. It's got all the technology there, but it's got classic lines. And I even got Chico aside and looked him in the face and said, "Tell me the truth. How shallow does it float?" And he said, "I was with Flip. I got out. I measured, Chico measured the water, got back in the boat, said 4 inches." You hear a lot of stories about how shallow boats run, but, and he said we weren't packed with a lot of ice or anything necessarily like that, but he said we were going out for a day of fishing and it was 4 inches of water. That's incredible.
That boat actually floats at the dock with no folks in it, but fully rigged for fishing. Full fuel, tackle, icebox, gear, everything. 3 1/8 inches.
That's incredible.
Boat weighs, just the hull itself, weighs about 365 pounds. And with the motor and the tower and the tank and everything else, the whole chivalry weighs 560 pounds.
That's incredible. See, I was talking with Hal Chittum about the boat, and he said there was only one other boat, and I know a couple guides in the 10,000 Islands have found one, and it was a shy poke popped off kind of a Willys, but it's a very small boat. It's only 15 foot, and it's a tiller drive.
It's called a slowpoke.
Slowpoke. As a matter of fact, I restored their logo for them because they came to me and said, "What do we with the logos?" And so I restored the logo for them. But that boat, I was with them and we taped a show down there, and it floated in very shallow water because their dog got out of it was a little Cocker Spaniel, and he was walking really shallow. And Hal said that is the only other boat that can go that shallow, but it's not as stable. It's a narrower boat because it's old. Yeah, it's an older design.
It's very old technology.
Yes.
It was actually, that boat was built for many, many years in wood by Willie Roberts on Tavernier Key.
Right.
And then I think Willie built a mold finally in his later years, right before he died. He built a mold which he ultimately sold to Freddie Archibald.
That's right.
Up in Homosassa.
Because they called him about the history of the boat.
Yeah, and Freddie began to build that boat in glass. It's a narrow boat, and it's a very, very classic design.
Very classic.
Keysy looking.
Keysy, very.
Yeah.
And where they rescued it was being used as a tender. I mean, they were sold to these yachts, and they saw one in a backyard in Naples, Florida, and saw it back there, climbed back through some weeds, and saw this boat, and it still had the original logo on it and everything. And it was a mess, though.
Dandy
and they
boats.
restored it. And
Dandy boats.
It was
much different in design.
Yes.
The bottom, that is. If you looked at the top, you would hardly be able to tell the difference between that boat and our boat. But the bottom of our boat is a totally unique concept, never before employed.
Tell me about the guy who came up with that.
I did.
You came up with
Yes.
that?
Yeah,
Really?
that's my design. That boat is my design.
That's incredible. That's fantastic.
And
you
it's
got to funnel all the ideas of all the years into what you wanted.
exactly what happened.
Incredible.
And originally, it was intended that Hal Chittum and I were going to build a boat each for ourselves, and that was going to be it. We had located Chris Morjohn, who is...
He's been a friend of yours, though, for years, right?
Chris we've known for many, many years, and Chris is probably the finest boat builder
And that's what Hal said.
that ever drew breath.
He says he's one of these guys that build a boat, make the money, see ya, I'm off fishing. That's what he was kind of like. I
He
said,
disappears for years at a
right,
time.
that's what he
And
said.
he goes and lives and...
But now he's got kids.
He takes them with him.
He takes them.
Yeah, he's a unique guy, but
Yeah.
what a magnificent talent, and what a pleasure to work with.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we formed an alliance, the three of us, and started this company, Hells Bay Boat Works. And
And the boat's called Whipray, right?
the model is called a whipray, right?
Whipray.
And we chose that name because the whipray is the one creature on the flats that goes the shallowest.
Well,
If you've ever seen rays on the flats, I mean, they go in almost no water at all.
No water at all.
And the alliance is one of those rare instances, this alliance between Chris and Hal and myself, where reality has been better than the dream.
That's great.
Yeah, we work real well together, and the concept has caught fire.
Oh, yeah.
It actually makes as much sense to folks as it made to us, which is refreshing.
I mean, it's very unique. You have like a storage box, too, that he makes the storage box also. That's incredible.
We have a little plant over in Titusville, and we call it the laboratory, and all of our ideas come to fruition there,
right there.
and it's been a fabulous process, and we have some amazing products waiting in the wings that'll be coming forth just after the first of the year.
That's
that
great.
I think will revolutionize some thinking in the industry, and you haven't heard the last of Hells Bay Boat Works yet.
Have you shot some shows in the boats? Have you
Oh
done
yes,
anything yet?
we have, yeah, quite a number actually.
Yeah, because I noticed here at the Shallow Water Expo that you had, and you told me a story, and I remember we were off of, I think we were in St. Pete. It was a cool day, and you were showing, doing a little demo out there, and people kind of wandered off, and there were only about 3 of us standing there, and you went into the story, because I know you love photography, and you went into the story how you lost all your photography, and Andrew. And when you told me the story of what happened to you and Andrew, I mean, the hair kind of stood up on my, to come out of your house and only see the corner of your house left, and one car gone, your boat gone, everything gone, total destruction, you know, and that's, I guess, you moved then after that, right? I mean, you had nothing to pitch a tent, I guess. And you lost all that photography, but you recently found some.
Some did turn up, some old black and white photos of the very, very early days miraculously turned up. I did lose all my slides, which was a lifetime of Everglades natural history work, but you know what? I've enjoyed replacing it, and I've worked real hard at replacing it. And,
good.
And so, you know, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about the success of your book. What did you think about that? I mean, I remember talking to you about you need to do a book, and you went. Well, I don't know. Who would read a book like that? You know, I mean, but what a beautiful piece of artwork.
Thanks.
I mean, that is a beautiful piece of. Great photographers in there. I'd like to see more of your things in there, but
it's all my friends. I mean,
what a wonderful
all
thing
my
to get
pals
involved.
contributed photography, so it's wonderful from
How
that
did that all come
standpoint.
about? I mean, how did that?
Neil and Linda Rogers did a book called Saltwater Fly Fishing Magic.
Right.
Several years back with Lefty and Stu and another group of photographers. And Lefty and Stu wrote the foreword into the book, and then the book was basically just photography from that point forward. And the book enjoyed tremendous success, and one day I was out in Denver at a fly tackle dealer show, and Neil and Linda Rogers were there. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, it wasn't there. I was in Panama, on the Pacific coast of Panama at a lodge, and Neil and Linda were there. And one evening we were having an adult beverage, and they said, we'd love to do another book, a little bit different than the first, and we'd love to collaborate with you on that book and have you write about the old days and so forth. And Lefty has been badgering me for years to write a book for a whole bunch of reasons, and I thought, well, here's a wonderful chance to do this, and it just sort of happened and came together, and I sat down in front of the computer, which is an unnatural place for me to be anyway, and all of a sudden
it was came out.
And I was lucky, I'm not an author, for God's sakes. I just sat there and recorded things that actually happened in my life. So it's not as though I sat there and did any research or had any great creative thinking. Really, it was just another chronicle of things that actually happened, and I was lucky by accident of birth to have been at a certain place at a certain time. And so although it says author, flip Pallot, I never delude myself into thinking that I'm anything more than what I am.
Mr. Nice Guy.
So
that's incredible. You have any plans for a second book?
I do. I'm doing a book right now called Fishing with Guides.
That's an interesting angle.
I spent a big chunk of my life guiding, and I know a lot of guides, and I think there's room for something like this, and so I'm forging ahead with that and hoping for the best, and I'm sure at the end of it I'll have all the problems that people have in getting it published and this and that, but I'm going to do it anyway.
You're going to work on it anyway. How about chronicling? I know you've kept a diary sort of type thing, and they use it in walkers, but I know you've noted things down through the years. Have you ever thought of putting that together? All the different experiences?
Could be.
That'd be an interesting book.
Could be.
I know I've kind of badgered you about that before, but that historical stuff, even stories of like George Hummel told me a story, and he likes you very, very much. And
I feel
George,
the same way about him.
And George said to me, I did an interview with George, and I said, name the most, if you had to get in a boat and fish with somebody, who would that be? Now, this is a man who's fished with everybody. And he said, you.
What?
Yes. He said,
Boy,
you.
am I flattered.
And I said, Flip Pallot? And he says, I think Flip is the most accurate caster, and he's such a gentle soul. This is what he said. I said, well, you got any good fish stories you can tell me? And he said, I got one really great one. And he said, the story he told us was that now you tell me if this is true, that you were fishing a tournament, a bonefish tournament. And he said that you couldn't get to the fish, so you got out of the boat. You started walking along, you hooked the fish, the line was around your leg. He says you have a permanent tattoo from the line.
Yeah, the line.
He said he could hear it burning through the skin.
Yeah. It was really quite a bit. I had to go to the hospital, and
oh, you did?
Oh yeah, it was. I got it. The line made a perfect loop around my shin as this bonefish ran, and it just burned its way, or ate its way into my. That was a pretty nasty.
What do they do for that? You didn't have stitches or anything, did you, like that, or it just made a
I'm so
burn?
Tough.
That's right.
I'm so tough. I just bit on a stick bait.
And then went back out and got another bonefish. I love it.
George Hummel is probably the finest bonefish guide that ever drew breath.
And you know what? He's so low key, you'd never know that.
Boy, in his day, George Hummel was unbelievable. A set of eyes and a feeling about the fish. he and I fished. I went through a competitive phase in my life where I fished competitively a lot, and a lot of it was done with George. Now, there were other guides, but George and I fished competitively for dollars in Calcuttas, and George is a great sporting man. I mean, he loves to bet.
Oh, I see.
And my goodness, we had some shining times.
Yeah.
We had some shining times. We won tons of tournaments.
That's amazing.
Tons of tournaments he and I won together. And it was one of those rare, wonderful teams.
It clicked.
There was a synergy there that was...
It's funny because he tells me about, he said, oh yeah, he said, I didn't know much about bone fishing, and I'm thinking to myself,
Oh.
And he said, I'd take a client out, and he said, I'd pull, and he said, all of a sudden I'd get up on a bar, and he'd say, okay guys, this is where we fish, right? He said in the first early days, and he said he would catch fish. It was just like, he said it was incredible that he would luck into these things. And I'm thinking, there's got to be more here than just luck.
You better bet there was.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, one day, I'll never forget this. George Hummel had a big bet on a major national golf tournament that Jack Nicklaus was playing in. He and Nicklaus were friends. And he had a big bet on Nicklaus. And we were fishing in a tournament that used to be one of the big tournaments in the Keys. It was called a spin out, and it was a spinning tournament where the tournament provided the line that you had to use. It was a 6-pound test line.
Wow.
And you had to go to this tournament headquarters, have your reel spooled with a special line. And it was a 2-day tournament in which you would leave the dock in the morning, and the idea was to catch the largest redfish, bonefish, and snook.
So it was kind of a slamish sort of thing.
Yeah, and they gave you a box, a cardboard box, to put your fish in. You would come back to the dock every day with this cardboard box and present this box to the weighmaster. And there were prizes for the first day, the second day, and then the overall deal, biggest individual of the 3 fish, the biggest Grand Slam or Royal Flush as they called it, whatever it was. And George and I went out the first day, and he decided that we were just going to bonefish. And God, he knew where all the big bonefish lived. And we caught a 13-pound something bonefish the first day. And these were kill tournaments.
Yeah. What year was this?
Oh my God, this had to be in the last of the 60s, first of the 70s. And of course, I'm not proud of having killed anything, but we thought it would never end. We didn't realize.
Right.
I mean, there was no threat to the resource then. And so we had this big, huge bonefish, and so on the first day, we got the biggest bonefish, and we fully intended to have the biggest snook and redfish by the time the tournament was over. And the next day, we left the dock at about 7:30 or whenever the starting time was. There was fired a cannon, and everybody would take off.
The shotgun
boats,
starts,
And I had a little tiller handle skiff, and we'd.
Why would I think that would be odd?
I had an old Challenger with a 50 horsepower Mercury and a tiller, and off we go, George and I. And as we're leaving, George says, "I got to be back at 10:30 for the." This was an all-day tournament. He says, "I got to be back at 10:30 for this golf match." Like, George, he goes, "Don't worry, we'll be fine. We'll be fine." And he tells me where to go.
You're in a contest now. He's limiting the time that you're going to be able to fish.
He tells me where to run, and he shows me points, and he keeps telling me, guide me. We pull up on this flat, and we need a redfish and a snook. And as we get to within 100 yards of the flat, he says, "Just keep it wide open, just keep it hooked up, jump over into the middle of this flat and head for that island." He says, "and there'll be a big hole in the middle of the flat." And he said, "Shut down just before the hole." And so we go, and I see the hole finally, and shut down. We pull over to the edge of the hole, and he says, "Just cast into the hole." I cast into the hole, and I caught a 15-pound snook. First cast.
You're kidding.
First cast. He says, "Now throw in there," he said, "let your jig go down to the bottom of the hole." The hole was maybe 20 feet deep. He said it was the deepest hole in Florida Bay. I throw in there, bounce the bottom, hook up right away, caught a big snapper. He said, "All right, just do that again. Let your jig go all the way down." I go down, hook up again, redfish. Nice big 8 or 10 pound redfish.
You're done.
We get the redfish in the boat. George says, okay, just go into the hole, jump up on plane, and then run off of the flat again. And we went right back to Plantation Yacht Harbor. We were back at the dock at about 8:30 with the biggest grand slam of that whole tournament.
And he was off going to see the golf?
Gone.
Gone. That's incredible.
Gone.
What a great story.
Yeah, George.
Too much. How about your association with Lefty Kreh? I heard a story that, I don't know where it came from, but when he first came down, he went to some club or something. He was going to demonstrate casting, and I heard you were going to go down there and show this guy, you know, because you were casting. And is this true?
Yeah, it is true, but I'll tell you something. To learn that whole story, you have to get my book.
Okay.
And read about it in there. I spent a whole chapter on that on that relationship with Lefty.
Yeah.
Lefty is my idol, my mentor, my great friend, and has probably been the single greatest influence on my life. I feel like those of us who are here in the sport today and know Lefty are like the people who were there and knew Babe Ruth when he was the man in baseball.
Right.
And people came and went after Babe Ruth and hit further and hit more and hit harder and everything, but still, there's only one Babe Ruth, as there will only be one Lefty Kreh. And all of us are so lucky that our paths crossed his.
Oh, yes.
I
mean, to watch him with kids, and it takes
with
time.
anybody, yeah.
And his endurance. I asked him, I said, how do you do it? I mean, he'll stay there and cast, and he wears everyone out. They're all gone. They're crawling back to their cars. They're done after 3.5 hours.
Incredible.
You know, well, he's a big cat napper. That's what you told me once.
Yeah.
He's the energy.
Sleeps, takes a little 15-minute nap every day at some point, lays down anywhere he can, on a table, under the table, in the floor of a boat, back of a truck, and
re-energizes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If I do that, I'm groggy for the rest of the day.
Me too.
It kills me.
I can't do that. Well, Flip, I really appreciate you taking this time with me. I really do. And
it's my great pleasure.
I'll tell you, you know, what pleasure it is for me. And hearing this history of, you know, the Keys and fishing in the area that I grew up, and it's wonderful to know that people were so passionate about what they did and still are that way. And I really thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
doing this. Thank you.